Today is a good day. Donald Trump has now been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for a second time, this time from a member of the Swedish parliament. We're now hearing that Bahrain will normalize ties with Israel in a historic peace arrangement. I don't know if it's a deal or how you want to describe it, but normalized ties between these countries is tremendous. And this is just more good news on top of good news over the past couple of weeks, with Donald Trump withdrawing troops from the Middle East. With the peace agreement between Israel and the UAE, we are on a good track. We're on a track towards peace. But today is also the 19th anniversary of September 11th, 2001. And it's a day of memorial and remembrance for the nearly 3,000 people who lost their lives, and for all the first responders, police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and everybody else who ran into the chaos to try and help, to try and save people, and many of these people who have lost their lives in the years since. It was a terrifying day, and it changed the foundation of this country in many ways that some would say are bad. We've had laws, we've had authoritarianism, we've had spying. We were shocked by what happened on 9/11. But I think we can at least say today is a good day. And I want to show you this photograph before we start and read all of this news. I said this photo is cool. I'm glad to see Americans coming together. It's a picture of Joe Biden and Mike Pence. You can tell they're smiling even though they're wearing masks. You can see it in their eyes. And they're giving each other a kind of forearm bump. The polarization in this country has been rather nightmarish. And, I've been talking about civil unrest, civil conflict for quite some time. And we even had some discussion earlier this morning about kind of the hyperpolarization. You've got people on the right thinking that Antifa is going around starting these fires. You got people on the left thinking that like right-wing extremists are going around with weapons and hunting down people they think are Antifa. And it's just getting crazy. It's just wildfires, man. There are people who are arsonists who are involved. But then I see this photo and it gives me hope. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden. For that matter, really Mike Pence. I mean, I'm rather tepid on them. Joe Biden takes the spotlight more so because he's running for president. But in this photo, all of that's washed away because we can at least recognize that as Americans, today is a day where we come together. And that makes me feel good. And when I see these stories about Trump's nomination for another Nobel Peace Prize, or I should say a second nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize, it makes me feel great. When I hear this story, I got to tell you, man, I was smiling and laughing when I heard that Bahrain will normalize ties with Israel. You need to understand, we are on the precipice of long-standing peace in the Middle East, and in its accomplishment for Donald Trump, his administration, and many of and these countries as well, including Bahrain and Israel. It was only about a week or so ago Bahrain said, "No way. We're not going to do it, but, we'll let planes fly over Bahrain." Now, apparently, Israel has said they're set to announce normalized relations. Trump's going to make an announcement later. I'm feeling really optimistic and really hopeful. I just hope that I say this on Twitter. Hopefully, we find our way through these dark times and come out stronger. And that's for us here in the United States. Let's take a look at some of the news. First, we have this tweet from Magnus Jacobson, who says, "I have nominated the U.S. government and the governments of Kosovo and Serbia for the Nobel Peace Prize for their joint work for peace and economic development. Through the cooperation agreement signed in the White House, trade and communications are important building blocks for peace." Many people have pointed out that this is, in fact, a second nomination for Donald Trump and his administration. I can't read Swedish, but he does say President Donald Trump, och hans administration, etc., pertaining to Kosovo. And so I think it's fair to say, what he means by U.S. government is the Trump administration, the efforts they took. And this is fantastic. This is now the second nomination Donald Trump has received. He received a nomination from a Norwegian member of parliament over the UAE-Israel normalization and peace deal, which is also just absolutely incredible, man. I want to see our troops come back. I want to see normalized relations. I want to see peace, cooperation, and I want to see an end to the fighting. We are a nation that has been at war endlessly, and the American people have had enough of it. I was really inspired when Tulsi Gabbard was running. The American Conservative, I think is the magazine, said Trump should fire Bolton and bring on Tulsi Gabbard instead, because there's something that conservatives and progressives have in common. We don't want war. Unfortunately, the resistance establishment Democrat types do. They do want war. I don't ask me why. They'll make up whatever reason for it. And there are regular people in this country just follow along with it. And I'm no fan. I've told you, man, I've talked to friends who are like, well, I used to be against war when the left was, but now that the Democrats are kind of for war and angry at Trump, I've thought about it. I actually had a friend tell me they read a neocon think piece, and now they understand why we must remain in the Middle East. And I'm like, what happened to you? This is great news. Donald Trump is doing this. This is fantastic. Take a look at this story. Bahrain to normalize ties with with Israel, Israeli media say. Now, Reuters is being very careful because Bahrain has not issued a statement yet. So take this all with a grain of salt. It may, I really doubt there's like Israeli ambassadors going to come out and be like, it's happening when it's not happening. But to be fair, once we get the official confirmation and the statement from Trump, we'll know for sure. So for now, it is only mostly, it is asserted by Israel. And so we'll see how things play out. Reuters says, and I'm showing you this first because I want to make sure that we have a fair assessment of what's potentially happening. Bahrain is to normalize relations with Israel. The diplomatic correspondent for Israel's public broadcaster Khan said in a tweet on Friday without citing sources. Another Israeli reporter, Rafael Aren of the Times of Israel, said U.S. President Donald Trump would on Friday announce that Bahrain was joining the United Arab Emirates in formally establishing ties with Israel. The White House has no immediate comment. Trump will on Tuesday host a White House ceremony solemnizing the Israel-UAE deal, which was announced on August 13th. The Cannes reporter, Amichai Stein, said Bahrain Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa would be in Washington on Monday. So here's the story we have from the Times of Israel. Trump expected to announce Bahrain will join UAE in normalizing ties with Israel. This is a certified, confirmed source. I'm going to go ahead and trust them on this one. They say two sources tell Times of Israel that announcement expected later Friday. Small island kingdom, long believed to be next in line to establish ties with the Jewish state. They say, according to the officials, Trump will make the announcement at the White House at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So by the time you've watched this, it must have already happened. Hopefully. It was not immediately clear whether Bahrain will join the formal signing of the so-called UAE Israel-Abraham Accord at the White House on September 15th, or simply issue a statement about its intentions to establish relations with Israel. Israel's Cannes public broadcaster reported the Bahraini Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa would be arriving in Washington on Monday. The Kingdom of Bahrain, a tiny island nation close to the UAE and Saudi Arabia, has been expected to be the next country to establish relations with Israel, as long as it made public overtures to the Jewish state. Now, I want to make a point real quick. This kind of subject is a bit esoteric and it's hard for people to follow. I know a lot of people probably don't pay attention to international conflict and foreign policy. I wish they would, because I feel like a lot of our resources, time and energy as Americans are wasted overseas. And I don't want to say completely wasted, but I just think we would be doing better building our own roads, our own infrastructure. And we got pipes in Flint that could use some let's just say some fixing, to put it mildly. We got problems in our own country. We got lead in the water. We got crumbling roads and bridges. And we can start allocating these resources back home and not be this force going into other countries. Now, I guess there's points to be made about, I had a talk with Sean Parnell on the IRL podcast, who mentioned we probably will need some people to remain, a small force in Afghanistan and Iraq, to make sure that it's not a humanitarian crisis and to prevent something like ISIS from happening again. And that I understand. We'll talk about this in a second. But what we're seeing here with Bahrain, and you need to understand, is that many of these Arabic nations do not recognize Israel as an actual place. And if you go to Israel, you can't actually go to many of these other countries. So there's a couple things that people do. When you go to Israel, when I went, they didn't stamp my passport. They gave me like a card and put it in my passport. I guess the issue is they know if they put that stamp in there and someone sees it, it could get you in trouble in other places. And considering they literally are in the Middle East, well, you might need to go to other countries around the Middle East. And if they see that in your passport, they're going to say, no way, because that's not a real place. The normalization of ties means we might actually see, look, Bahrain said they wanted a Palestinian state. And a week ago, they said they weren't going to normalize relations. This just means more conflict, more crisis, more pain, more suffering, more U.S. dollars going overseas. This is what you got to realize, too. Let's put this in terms of American economy. We spend a ton of money on defending Israel, on giving them grants to help protect them, because they are a strong ally of the U.S. in the Middle East. And a lot of people like to ask, why is that? I've seen leftists say, you can't even tell me why America is an ally to, why Israel and America are great allies. And I actually can. It's because Israel is actually a very democratic country in a sense. Like they have normalized democratic institutions. You can, listen, there are things you can do in Israel. It's very, very prosperous and very westernized, to put it mildly. I don't want to purport to know what kind of rights or civil rights or whatever you have in Israel, but I'll just tell you I've been there and it's much more progressive, to say the least, than many of these other countries. So they're a great ally because they represent freedom and democracy a bit more so than some of these other countries. Now I know many people on the left would say that's not true. Take a look at Palestine, yeah, absolutely. We got to figure out that problem, and that is that is like the problem. How do we solve the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian territories and whether there'll be a Palestinian state? But I'll tell you this. One of the ways that we do solve this problem and we do bring about true peace in the Middle East, and whatever the solution might be, I believe it needs to start with the normalization of relations with Israel and other countries, because Israel will exist. Some of these countries have said they shouldn't. No, Israel does and should. Now, how that pertains to the freedom of the Palestinian people, that's a different question, because I believe the Palestinian people have their human rights as well. We want to solve this problem. I'm not going to pretend to know anything about, how this, will be solved or whatever, but I'll tell you this. When I see countries offering up these peace agreements, these normalization of relations, Kosovo is part of that deal, are going to be recognizing Israel as well. Kosovo. Then it's good news. Whatever moves us towards peace. And if we can get a bunch of countries to recognize Israel, and then we start dealing with the problems not through physical violence, but through trade and conversation and, political relations, well, then we're going to be better off, man. I'll tell you what. There's a lot of jokes about how we could end war, like replace war with like the World Cup or something. If you want to get into a fight over territory, we'll play a soccer game. Whoever wins, can move forward on the territory or something like that. There's jokes like that. But it's because we'd much rather not have to die over these political issues, and we'd much rather find compromise. And I think it's fair to say everybody wants world peace. No, I know I say everybody, but I'm sure there's a decent amount of people who do not want world peace. They just call those people villains, I guess. They want war for profit. And like Trump said, man, they don't like him. They don't like him because Trump is doing it. I'm so excited for this stuff, man. You have no idea. I am so excited for this stuff. And Trump is pulling it off. And I am waiting for the left, the progressive anti-war people, to come out and be like, we're going to vote for Trump for these reasons. Of course, the left says Trump is still playing to a lot of these weapons manufacturers and things like that. I'll tell you what, man, you got an opportunity right now, okay? Joe Biden wants to draw down our troops, he says, but he wants to leave several thousand there to make sure, there's not a humanitarian crisis, and to make sure that there's not terrorists who come in, and you don't want to create a power vacuum. I don't know if 2,000 is the right number, but I'll tell you this. I can respect saying you want to end the wars and you want to do it tactfully, but I'm sorry, I don't trust Joe Biden. I don't. Because the Obama administration promised to end all these wars, and what did they do? Was it like 7 new wars, some ridiculous amount of war? Like it was just like nonstop. Donald Trump is doing it right now, and he didn't even ask me to vote for him. I didn't want to vote for him. I was like, nah, get out of here. I don't believe it. And instead of making a promise, he did make the promise, mind you. He says he's going to end these forever wars. He's doing it. He's actually withdrawing the troops. He's actually setting up peace agreements. And I'm just like, I'm going to take the win, man. I'm going to take the win. Trump is not anywhere near as bad as they say he is in the press. And this is a major victory for people of the world, in my opinion. Is it perfect? No. Will there still be conflict? Of course there will be. Is there still going to be death? Yes. Is this going to create some complications? Yes. But it's a net positive across the board. Let's read a little bit more. Trump hinted during a Thursday press conference that another country may join Israel and the UAE for their normalization signing ceremony at the White House. Next week at the White House, we'll be having a signing between the UAE and Israel, and we could have another country added into that. And I will tell you that countries are lining up that want to go into it, Trump said during a White House press briefing. You'll be hearing other countries coming in over a relatively short period of time, and you could have peace in the Middle East. Fingers crossed. This would be historic. Look, already with the UAE, the dominoes are coming down. Peace is starting to become visible. It's coming into focus. Maybe Trump deserves a peace prize for this, or maybe we want to say, you know what, this is the prize. Like this moment, if Trump can secure many different countries coming together, could you imagine normalized relations with countries like Iran and North Korea? I'd love to see it. And I feel like we're moving in that direction. I don't know if Trump's going to be able to pull it off. I don't know if he'll win. And I don't know if Congress or the Democrats or the Republicans that have blocked him from trying to withdraw troops in the past are going to be on board with a lot of the things he's done. And the media in the U.S. has dragged and insulted Trump for going and meeting with Kim Jong-un and trying to normalize and stabilize relations. Trump tweeted out something about Kim Jong-un being in good health, saying you can't keep him down. And people were like, what's this? And they were insulting and criticizing Trump. And it's like, listen, man, we know North Korea is bad. OK, we know they're doing bad things. Trump's playing up to these people saying, I'm not going to drag you. I'm not going to insult you. Let's talk, because you have to start somewhere. You have to compromise in terms of rhetoric. I'm not saying compromise in terms of what they're doing. Absolutely not. They've got gulags. They got concentration camps. Or I shouldn't call them concentration camps. They got essentially work camps. I don't think it's necessarily the same as what China is doing, but they put their dissenters in camps and sentence them to forced labor. We want to end all this stuff. To a certain degree, like obviously prisons will still exist, but we want to get rid of all these horrifying things, normalize trade. Trump has been doing that. He really has. And I'm really excited for what's going to happen next. Let's read more. Trump did not elaborate on the country that might be added into the signing and did not specify which countries might attend the Tuesday ceremony, but said that a number of big ones are going to come in, and mentioned having spoken recently to Saudi Arabia's King Salman. I spoke to the King of Saudi Arabia, so we're talking. We just started the dialogue. Oh, man, it wasn't clear if Trump meant that another country could join Israel and the UAE at the ceremony or join their normalization agreement. In the weeks since the normalization deal was announced on August 13th, U.S. and Israeli officials have said other Arab states will follow the UAE's lead and normalize ties with Israel, with speculation including Oman and Bahrain. Saudi Arabia and Bahrain agreed to allow Israeli planes to use their airspace following the normalization agreement in what was seen as a significant step forward toward warmer relations, but have expressed hesitation about normalization with Israel. Bahrain's king recently told the White House advisor Jared Kushner, who is a key player in the normalization push, that Manama would only ink a deal in concert with Saudi Arabia. And Riyadh's crown prince told Kushner that an Israeli-Palestinian peace accord must precede any normalization agreement in line with the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative. King Salman and the crown prince Mohammed bin Salman, they feel very strongly about the Palestinian cause. They would like to see the Palestinians work a fair deal and improve the lives of their people, Kushner told reporters during a briefing on Wednesday. But again, they're going to do what's in the best interest of Saudi Arabia and the Saudi people and Muslim people from throughout the world as they take that responsibility very seriously, Kushner said. We'll see what happens and for how long. They want to do it. But I will say that a lot of people are losing patience with the Palestinian leadership. They go on to mention for his part, Trump on Thursday made a point in lauding UAE Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan for his willingness to formalize relations with Israel. Trump called the UAE's de facto leader a warrior and said Mohammed's very excited about this. It's amazing. It really, really is amazing. Now, listen, Joe Biden recently said that the U.S. must maintain a small force in the Middle East, has no plans for major defense cuts. I'm not saying he's wrong. I've had conversations with people who agree with Biden that there's got to be some small force in the Middle East, and I can respect that. Donald Trump seems to want to just get us out of these wars. We'll see how Trump plays it. With Biden, you seem to be getting a kind of middle of the road. Yes, I'll give you what you want, but we'll still have some forces there. The major issue, however, is that I just don't trust Joe Biden. I want to be as cordial as I can in this segment pertaining to Biden, especially considering what today is, and recognize this is just a plain disagreement. And I have little faith in Joe Biden as he was the vice president under Obama. And here the story from the LA Times. This is from January 13th, 2017. President Obama, who hopes to sow peace, instead led the nation in war, several wars. And I am not enthused about it. And he signed the National Defense Authorization Act with the indefinite detention provisions. He re-upped the AUMF, which was the authorization for use of military force in the Middle East, which is fairly standard, but still just is the persistence of conflict in the Middle East. And we didn't get what we were told we were going to get with Obama. That's why I voted for him the first time, not the second time. We also have this story from NPR. Pledging to end 2 wars, Obama finds himself entangled in 3. There's a lot of conflict, a lot of war, and it's unfortunate. And Joe Biden might actually believe these things. Honestly, I don't think so. I do not trust the man. I'm sorry. I can respect that photo of him and Mike Pence and say thank you for coming together on a day like today and to never forget, to remember 9/11. But still, Joe Biden seems to be pandering. I'm looking at a president right now who's got an issue with Trump. Trump just speaks. You know what I mean? He just starts talking. And then he goes off on these tirades, and there's issues of whether he's going to give a cohesive speech. And he says, I don't get a teleprompter. And then he just kind of trails off and will be like, yeah, but Biden this and Biden that. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the bombastic character stuff. Some people really like it. But I'll tell you what, I don't care about that. You know why? Because these peace agreements seem to be coming into focus. They're happening. This is real. This is what matters. Trump could come out and he could recite, the 7 words you can't say on TV, do the whole bit by George Carlin and just spit and yell and point fingers and call everyone the worst name in the book. And I'm going to be like, are you done? Because that peace deal you got done, I love it. I don't care what he says at this point. I want to see him do better. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to remember this come November. And we're going to see what happens in the next coming months. I think we've got more on the way that's in line with peace agreements. And that's what the American people have wanted forever. There are some people in this country that are evil. And they want to make money, and they want to keep pumping out weapons and machines, sending them over to these countries, taking the oil. Donald Trump just come out and says it. He's like, we withdrew many troops from Syria. We got a bunch guarding the oil. And I just laugh. I'm like, I think Trump has got his, here's what I think. I think Trump has made a ton of mistakes. I do not like a lot of his foreign policy decisions with drones, with missile strikes, and with commando raids. I think he's improving. But I also think that Trump inherited this foreign policy problem from past several presidents. And so he's kind of got no choice in some regards. So he just kind of just blurts out what's going on because he doesn't like it. I genuinely believe Trump doesn't want to be in these wars. He's spoken out against them before he was president a long time ago. And I think he's kind of got his hands tied. And they really, the media, the military industrial complex, the establishment, they want the wars. They don't want it to stop. They want to be the big name, man. They want to be the people who control it all. They want to force people to bend the knee to them. Trump just wants to make America safe and secure and great. He's got character issues, but I'm sorry, man. So many of the bad things he's done is being washed away when I see these peace agreements. Should he get a Nobel Peace Prize? I don't know, but I would say he's more deserving than many, many people. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. It is a different channel, and I will see you all then.